So Russia is trying to alert the world that the U.S. has funded biolabs in Ukraine and that those labs were conducting AIDS research on Ukrainian military personnel. That is perhaps the craziest sentence I'm going to utter this week. Let me say that again. Ukraine was using biolabs, and they were using those biolabs conducting AIDS research on Ukrainian soldiers. Yes, taking Ukrainian soldiers and testing AIDS research on them. Of course, you'll recall the U.S. denied that there were any biolabs in Ukraine. The Department of Defense even called it Russian propaganda at the time and laughed in a reporter's face for even asking this question, you smug son of a bitch. This is exactly what John Kirby did when a reporter had the gall to ask about these biolabs that are listed on the State Department's website. But it's all Russian propaganda, he said. Watch.
And on this issue of military biological labs in Ukraine that the Russians keep raising, can you basically explain to us what type of relationship, if any, there was between the Pentagon and the Ukrainian side on any biological labs? When was the last cooperation? And what do you have to say about these Russian accusations?
The Russian accusations are absurd. They're laughable. And, you know, in the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda. And I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't give it a drop of ink worth paying attention to.
Yeah, but can you explain to us has there been any relationship between the Pentagon?
We are not developing biological or chemical weapons inside Ukraine. It's not happening. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Go ahead.
Don't even print any stories about it. Don't just waste your. Don't even print any stories about it. Don't waste any ink on it at all. It's just total malarkey. Well, we know that was a lie. And we now know, of course, the biolabs, thanks to Victoria Nuland, came out in congressional testimony from the State Department, admitted this to Congress. She had to because it was on the State Department's website. It was on the State Department and embassy websites that there's biolabs. We knew that it was out there. We knew that I mean, you can't hide this stuff. But they tried to. But Victoria Nuland came out and admitted it. Watch.
I only have a minute left. Let me ask you. Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Last question. I am certain that the Russians...
Sorry, my Steam Deck's not working. Anyway, yeah, just let me feed you the question.
Here's this softball. Yeah. Right. Toss it. I'm going to toss it in real slow for you here. Here it comes. Here's a softball. Ready? There you go. Hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it.
And she laughs. She's even laughing. She's like, "Thank you, Senator, for that very easy question." It wouldn't even, cross my mind. Of course, it would be Russian propaganda. People with a low IQ, that's how they speak. People who don't understand what's going on, they'll just blame anything on Russian propaganda. That's all they do. It's the easiest way out because then it shuts down conversation. Intelligent people don't talk like that. So her worry when the war started was that Russian troops would gain control of these labs and gain access to resources, she said, meaning she was prepping us for Russia to see these things and that when they say it, we should preemptively know that this would be disinformation. Well, Russia has gained access now. And these areas are in Russian control. And wouldn't you know it, we're learning some things. And they can deconstruct these labs on their own. And they say that they have. The labs were in Luhansk through a company called Farm Biotest. Now, I want to say that Mike Jones, our friend Mike Jones from Iowa Gray, has seen these labs and spoken to Ukrainians who confirmed to him that people in this region were being experimented on. Confirmed this. We have seen this footage. We have seen the footage, but we will leave it to him to show it when he's good and ready. And we encourage you to follow what he does in his great reporting. So, Russian Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov presented Ukrainian language documents referring to HIV infection studies that began in 2019. The list of targeted groups shows service members alongside prisoners, drug addicts, and other patients at high risk of infection. Now, these documents show that what Newland said, that the U.S. was trying to relocate personnel and move biological materials out of Ukraine into Poland, the Baltic states, and Central Asia as the Russian troops advanced in Ukraine during the special operation. They also show, these documents show, that the United States was working on coronavirus since 2015. And they published this document. Notice this refers to if any experiments proposed for AIM-1 result in a virus with phenotype of enhanced pathology and transmissibility, growth of more than 10, blah, 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 blah. Notice this refers to the NIH funding, the last sentence there. No NIH funding can be used to perform such experiments until these experiments had been approved by the NIAID. So notice this refers to NIH funding, which Dr. Fauci says he knew nothing about, because it wasn't happening on his continent, right? It's happening over there. Plausible deniability. According to Kirillov, the Russian military has recovered more than 20,000 documents and other materials related to the biological programs in Ukraine. While interviewing eyewitnesses and participants, Russia asked the United Nations to investigate this, but the UN is just not that into that idea, of course. So they said, no, thank you. Now, remember in October when they asked, Russia went to the United Nations and said, hey, all these biolabs that they had first denied existed, then they acknowledged they existed. We want to know what they were actually doing there. Were they doing military biological activities? We want to know. And by the way, China asked as well. We want to know what the U.S. is doing with these biolabs in Ukraine, because there's been some disturbing reports coming out. And the UN said, nah, we're not going to vote to allow that to happen. We're not going to investigate.
It's also funny because how often do we talk about how corrupt the Ukrainian government is? It's like one of the most corrupt governments in Europe, right?
Yep.
So we've pointed that out. So think about that. They have this information. Mm-hmm. So could it be, and this is just spitballing, that Zelensky had that information and is using that and saying, hey, I'll release this if you don't give us billions of dollars, if you don't give us weapons, you know, because like
blackmail.
Blackmail. Because Biden was involved in some of the labs too, Hunter, and you know there was some money changing hands there. So
we're gonna get to that. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, possibly we've seen documents though, and we'll get to that in a minute, that show Zelensky was asking for documents to be destroyed that related to Hunter Biden. So how complicit were, you know, and maybe this was early on, so we knew we're going to get tons of money from the United States. I've got to destroy these Hunter Biden relationship documents and all of that. So I'll go along. But look, here's the thing. You're right. If you're in this situation, you know you've got like backup hard drives, you've got backup thumb drives, you've got backup stuff, you're burning documents or whatever, but you've got the goods somewhere hidden that in case you need it, like blackmail, you could pull it out.
Yeah, they're not going to lose their advantage.
Right. So last October, Russia filed an official complaint over alleged U.S.-backed biological activities in Ukraine and requested a United Nations probe into the matter, but then the UN Security Council said, nah, rejected it. Rejected Moscow's proposal. The U.S., of course, voted against it. The U.K. voted against it, and so did France. Because we're all about transparency, right? So why would they do this? If they were really interested in preventing future pandemics, isn't an investigation in everyone's interest? But of course, they would want to cover this up. And this, of course, goes all the way to the top, right to President Biden himself and his son, Hunter Biden. As we recently reported on Redacted, back in 2014, a firm by the name of Biota, which specializes in detecting, tracking, and analyzing potential disease outbreaks, signed an $18.4 million federal contract as a subcontractor for Black & Veatch in Georgia, the country of Georgia, and Ukraine. Biota was started with the help from President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his investment firm, Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners, which he founded alongside John Kerry's stepson in 2009. Then, surprisingly, when all of this started smelling bad, the top Ukrainian prosecutor started to look into this. Like, something's not sitting right here. Like, why is the vice president's son on the board of a Ukrainian company? And by the way, what the hell are they doing in these bio labs? Interesting. And so when the top prosecutor in Ukraine started looking into this shady connection between Hunter Biden and these bio labs, then Vice President Biden caught wind of it on his trip to Ukraine and had a special message that he wanted to deliver to the Ukrainian government. Hey, you know all that money that you're supposed to be getting from us? The billions of dollars that we're about to be sending you? Unless that prosecutor is fired, the one that's, looking into my son, you're not going to get that money. You're not going to get that money. And the worst part about this whole thing is, not the worst part, is the fact that he admitted this on camera at the Council on Foreign Relations. In front of the cameras, he admitted this. Watch.
I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
I love how they're all laughing, too. They're like, we know how the game's played. All the Council on Foreign Relations, warmongering.
So what you're saying
I love it when... I personally find it hilarious when people abuse their power and authority to ruin the lives of somebody that's just doing their freaking job.
Right.
It's hilarious to me.
Like a top prosecutor who's looking into this. By the way, the United States wouldn't look into it. In fact, the FBI in the United States buried the laptop story. So think about this. Ukraine, the most corrupt government in Europe, their prosecutors actually started to look into this. And we had him fired. In the United States, we covered up the story. The FBI covered it up. The deep state.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like you got Ukraine on the list of corruption, and we're like above them. So it's like, the corruption trickles down because we're definitely more corrupt than.
Right. They're following the leader. Right. So in February of last
our corruption. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to real quick. I was going to say our corruption is legal because we pass laws. Our corrupt politicians pass laws to make their corruption legal. Right. So it's not really corruption because it's legal.
Right. We have it on the books. You can see it in the tax code. So in February of last year, documents show that Volodymyr Zelensky, then president of Ukraine, ordered the destruction of all documents related to this Hunter Biden connection at the biolabs. So these documents were unearthed. We featured these on the show a number of months ago. Zelensky ordered destruction of all state documents associated with Biota on February 24th, 2022, which is also very an interesting date, right? That's the very day the war starts. Well, if you don't discount, if you discount the 8 years of genocide that Ukraine was carrying out against the Donbass, this was like the special military operation start of the war in February. So you better get to these biolabs and start burning these documents as quickly as you can. So then what happened that day was an amazing coincidence because NBC News was in Kyiv. They had cameras set up so that they could cover the impending, Russian invasion, right? So they had their cameras set up. They had reporters there, and they were filming different things, and they were trying to claim that, hey, these fires that we're seeing at this building, at this one building here, these fires, that's because Russia attacked this building, and you can see fires around the city. Russia attacks, and just how horrible this is. But there's just one problem with this video. NBC News didn't know at the time. They actually caught Ukrainian biolabs workers taking these documents and dumping them into a fire out back. But I love this video. I mean, it really is just an amazing piece of video. And just watch how NBC spins this that morning on the Today Show, because they don't even know what video they've got. And they're zooming in on this, and they're like, holy crap, now we have the proof. Watch.
Good morning, Tom. Ukraine is now under assault by air, land, and sea. In the small hours of the morning here in the capital, people were woken up to the sounds of explosions, followed by sirens. A number of missiles have hit a variety of different military installations here in the capital, including the military intelligence headquarters, which is just 4 miles from where I am standing. Now, 20 miles from the capital is the town of Hostomel.
So do you see that there? These guys, look at that. Yeah, I mean, look, this was an attack by Russians as these workers bring bags of documents out of the building and throw them into the fire. Yep, toss it in there. Toss it in there. Look at these Russian attacks.
Hey, guys, we may as well not waste the Russian fire.
Keep it warm.
These documents.
Right. To get all these, take all the documents out of the, out of the intelligence offices and throw them out there.
And notice her too.
Burn them.
She's in like a flak jacket doing a news report next to a fire of documents.
Right. I know. Like, she's really on the front lines. They're really there. So in 2014, Metabiota, the EHA, and the Wuhan Institute of Virology were all named as researchers in a study on infectious diseases derived from Chinese bats. Sound familiar? So, it just comes full circle. So again, we'll see, and we'll see if there's going to be any sort of investigation into this. We'll see if any reporters are able to ask questions of anybody in the Biden administration for answers. Will they get answers about Hunter Biden's relationship, these documents, the shady dealings? What have they been testing there? Testing HIV and on unwitting Ukrainian soldiers. All of that. I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of it. But we'll continue to cover the story here on the show because the mainstream media will largely ignore it. That's what they'll do. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.